Harry and Meghan's claims about supposed racists in the royal family have left a predictable and poisonous legacy for the last few years. We live in an age where grievances are given the benefit of the doubt, where the establishment is toxic by default, where my truth apparently means more than the truth. They knew the power their words would hold, and many people across the world took their words at face value. Now, almost 3 years on, Britain is still dealing with the fallout from this.
And also concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
What? About how dark your baby is going to be?
Potentially, and what that would mean or look like.
Hold up.
There's
Stop
several
right now.
There's several conversations.
There's a conversation with you?
With Harry.
About how dark your baby is going to be?
Potentially, and what that would mean or look like.
Ooh. And you're not going to tell me who had the conversation?
I think that would be very damaging to them.
Okay.
Compartmentalized
they were
conversations.
concerned that if he were too brown, that would be a problem. Are you saying that?
I wasn't able to follow up with why, but if that's the assumption you're making, I think that feels like a pretty safe one.
You may recall that I lost my previous job for responding to these claims by saying I didn't believe a word of it. Well, Harry and Meghan have never provided any evidence for that highly incendiary claim. It's not like they haven't had the chance to. After all, they pumped out 6 hours of self-indulgent bilge on Netflix, trashing Britain and the press for its racism, but didn't mention what they said on Oprah. Harry wrote 150,000 words of family-bashing poison in his memoir Spare and toured the TV studios to promote it. It didn't mention what they'd said to Oprah Winfrey. Meghan had a 12-part podcast on Spotify. Didn't mention it either. It was like it never happened, like it disappeared. Clearly, neither of them gave a damn about royal protocol or family privacy. In fact, they built a whole industry around violating their own privacy and that of their relatives. Instead of backing up those claims about racism on their relentless publicity tour, Harry did a sort of strange U-turn, didn't he, a few months ago? Tried to pretend they'd never said them. It was us. It was the media.
In the Oprah interview, you accuse members of your family of racism. You don't even...
No, we didn't.
Well,
The British press said that.
Right.
Did Meghan ever mention that they were racist?
She said there were troubling comments about Archie's
there was
skin
concern
colour.
about his skin colour.
Right. Wouldn't you describe that as essentially racist?
I wouldn't, not having lived within that family.
Took him 2 years to do that U-turn. 2 years of the royal family are a bunch of racists flying around the world. I was in America through a lot of that period, and they all believed it because it had appeared on Oprah. Then he says, I never meant to say anything about racism. What are you all talking about? It's the beastly media. Well, now Harry and Meghan's lick-spittle client journalist Omid Scobie, the man who lied about his age, said he was 33 when in fact he was 38, a bit older now, said he never used private jets and then got reminded of an Instagram picture of him the week before he denied that this week, showing him on a private jet. The man who said that I have regular phone calls with Queen Camilla, regular phone calls. Never had one phone call with Queen Camilla in my entire life. I'd like to, but she doesn't call. Well, Scobie is back with a spiteful, lie-filled new book that's poured fuel on the flames. He says that Meghan wrote private letters to King Charles, naming 2 royals who she accuses of taking part in those supposedly troubling conversations about Archie's skin colour. Scobie initially said he knew the names but couldn't legally report them. But of course, he could have done outside of the UK. He could have done it in America if he wanted to, where the book is published. He could have done it anywhere. But he said he never names names, which is another of his lies. And yet overnight they were sensationally revealed, suddenly, out of nowhere, in the Dutch version of Scobie's book. Journalists had been sent copies and the book was briefly on sale in bookstores before being suddenly withdrawn in a dash by the publishers. Scobie initially said it was a translation error, which didn't really make any sense, because how do you mistranslate names? They're either there or they're not. The publisher now says it wasn't translation, it was simply an error. But how did that error happen? How is there an entire different version appearing in a Dutch edition of this book. The consequence of that error is that millions of people online around the world now know the royals are again being implicated in what I think is a completely baseless claim of inferred racism. There is, again, massive speculation about who the people are who were supposedly making comments about Archie's skin colour, which is incredibly unfair to all the royal family. They've all been tarred with this brush now for years. Well, I'm going to end all this nonsense because, frankly, if a book is on the streets in Holland, available to Dutch people, containing names that Omid Scobie, the lickspittle scribe for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, the man who you may remember denied they had any involvement in the last book. And so did Meghan. Do you remember? No, had nothing to do with it. But then in court, many months after the book was published, under oath, she had to admit she had emailed her aides briefing notes for when they met Scobie. So she was one of his primary sources on that first book. Now again, we're being told she had nothing to do with this. And maybe she didn't. And maybe we should be believing Omid Scobie when he says he did not ever write these names down in any draft of his book. It just somehow popped up in the Dutch version of the book. How? I've written 10 books, I think it is now. I've never had a version of my book pop up in a foreign edition that contained unbelievably damning allegations about two of the most famous people in the world, and I had nothing to do with it and didn't know how it got there, and nor did anybody else. How does it get there, Omid? Surely you as the author, I mean, you must be furious, right? You must be demanding. Heads roll. And you want names, don't you, ironically, Omid, about who did this to you? Who besmirched your reputation as an author? I would, Omid. I'd want to know right now, especially if I was trying to convince the world that I had nothing to do with it myself and I'd never, ever put these names in writing. And maybe some lawyer had come along and told me not to. I mean, that couldn't possibly have happened because you've given us your word. And as I've established so far in this monologue, your word is your bond and should be taken as sacrosanct. Well, I'm going to cut through all this crap. I'm going to tell you the names of the two senior royals who are named in that Dutch version of the book. Because frankly, if Dutch people wandering into a bookshop can pick it up and see these names, then you, British people here, who actually pay for the British royal family, you're entitled to know too. And then we can have a more open debate about this whole farrago, because I don't believe any racist comments were ever made by any of the royal family. And until there is actual evidence of those comments being made, I will never believe it. But now we can start the process of finding out if they ever got uttered, what the context was, and whether there was any racial intent at all. Like I say, I don't believe there was. The royals who are named in this book are King Charles and Catherine, Princess of Wales.